asshole or nice guy? Principled, honest. He just has delusions of grandeur. He wants everybody to like listen
Sounds
to
like
him.
someone I know.
You know? Yeah.
Why are you looking at me?
Yeah.
I mean, Christ's sake.
Ivy League education or non-Ivy League,
Right.
which one's better?
Out of curiosity, what were you doing in Malaysia?
No, I'm bullish on
Did that look in
Malaysia.
the
I'm
face?
finally bullish on Malaysia.
What's changed your mind the last 12 months?
Monologue alert. Monologue alert.
It's not again.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever recording of the Unreasonable Podcast live from Poddster. Fantastic place, I think. Wonderful facilities, making our lives easier. Thank you very much for tuning in. Starring none other than Vishal Harnal, 500 Global, Michael Blakey, Cocoon Capital, and me, myself, and I, Hian Go from Open Space Ventures. Guys,
You definitely have multiple personalities today for sure. I don't think the audience knows this, but Hian recorded the opening 5 times.
well, it's a new environment. I'm just kind of nervous.
Performance anxiety.
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
met somebody
This
ask for like,
happens.
what, am I in the right frame? I didn't even know what. I just sat down and kind of started talking. And he was
So,
like,
Michael, how was the trip to London?
it was fantastic. I was a few days in London and the whole kind of European tour, talking to investors, which is always great fun. We've got enough now for our first close.
Yay!
So
Very cool.
super excited about
Congratulations.
And fees.
and we've got management fees. I will still be the lowest, just because I want to make you guys happy. So I've got management fees, but I have still insisted that I will be the lowest paid person in the fund.
What does that make
So
you happy?
I will still expect you guys to be my taxis
This is
to
why.
drive me everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
This is
Okay.
Okay. But it's something I firmly believe in. But apparently nobody else who works at Cocoon wants to work for free, funnily enough. So they get the salary. I'll just have to wait a little bit before my returns come in. But
We're
no, it's
totally
super
happy
fun.
to sponsor whatever it is going forward, but we've cut you off from having any more children, though. You know?
That's right.
So too many mouths to feed under the Blake.
Trust me, I've had enough cuts. I don't. That is now truly resolved.
Well, I just had the big birthday, right?
I guess
So
so.
I
You
yeah.
did just turn 50.
I did just turn 50. The
Happy
big
belated.
50. Thank you. Yeah.
And we had a lovely tour through your life.
Yeah.
I have got to say, I was impressed. You were a cute kid. I mean, I thought those little.
was.
It was very cute. I don't know what's happened to you since then, but when you were young, you were,
Yeah, it's got hanging out with you guys. That's
Trust me, that will do it. Yeah.
no.
Bit of
Anyway,
stress.
We did sap away your good looks. I mean,
no.
Yeah.
No. So for the viewers' sort of edification, I got everybody together for a drinks event. I thought that was better than say a sit-down dinner. And then I figured so many people have been there from so many different stages of my life that I did a short PowerPoint presentation, only 15 minutes. And that was what you're referencing. You saw the picture of me when I was in Dulwich College with the long hair.
was it just 15 minutes?
It was slightly longer than
The
15 minutes.
fashion
but that's-
mistakes I've gone through, the ex-girlfriends, there was one in there.
But can I ask you a question? I was going to ask you in the evening, but I didn't want to shout it out and show you up. But your greatest success was not there. Your first ever film, it was something to do with chickens. What was it called again? He's got a cult
You know
film.
that,
Did
right?
you know about his cult film? He has a cult film. Talking
I am
chickens?
the executive producer of Colin Go's first amateur film called Talking Cock.
Talking cock. That was it.
The movie.
Yes.
Yeah, I financed that.
Yeah.
I did.
No.
I did.
Yeah.
I did finance that.
Were you the executive producer in the sense I've given you some money so I get
Yeah.
a credit?
Yeah.
Or were you actively involved in the...
No, executive producer. So I
Okay.
just gave him the money and promptly lost most of it. Vishal, what have you been up to?
Well, since the last time, we recorded the last episode
Yeah.
when I was in Seoul. So
Oh, yes.
I dialed in
Von
remotely
Kustenhof.
with my...
Someone
Hong Kong
sent you
Art
a meme.
Basel. Yeah,
Someone
there's
sent you a meme
someone
of
sent
that.
me a meme.
That's
so
great.
Hat tip to that person. Memed my outfit for the last episode. But no, not that much has happened since I went away. 2 momentous occasions were, well, I celebrated my partner Kylie's, my business partner
40th.
Kylie's 40th birthday.
Yeah.
That happened at the start of May. And literally 2 weeks later was your 50th birthday that took place. After that, probably the most remarkable thing happened, which is I flew to the Bay Area with my parents. My brother lives in the Bay Area. and I met my nephew for the first time, Kai. First grandchild in the family. It was wonderful. Just 2 weeks of nothing but spending time with family, and my entire life revolving around the sleeping habits of a 5-month-old. So that's what I've been up to. Nothing more than that. I just got back a couple of days ago, so I'm a little bit out of it.
Well, it's great that you mentioned Kylie, because we can kind of move to our next topic, which is why now I'm so bullish on Malaysia. And I just came back and I had breakfast with Kylie yesterday, and we talked along about so many things in life.
Nice.
Yeah. So the joke I have with Kylie is that I see you very often, and I see Kylie once a decade, right? So the last time, Kylie and I sat down and talked for 2 hours, was when he was turning 30 and I was turning 40, and then we kind of, we exchanged notes. Yeah, we exchanged notes. You know, and then we sat down there and we talked for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I downloaded how one feels to cross the big 5-0, and he also talked about what the big 4-0. Yeah. And then we started talking about all the different kind of personalities of startup founders. So we came up with all the usual ones, which is like, you know, Ivy League education or non-Ivy League, which one's better, right? The other one that he came through was...
Okay, just a question there before we're moving on, though. What were your thoughts on that, though? Because that's a really interesting...
I was trying to avoid that one. Okay, so let's do this bit, right? So he said, Ivy League education or non-Ivy League education, which would you choose, right? So do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Oh, okay. So I said to Kylie straight away, I would choose someone with a good Ivy League education if he or she was an outsider when they went to the university. You know, can you imagine if somebody who kind of like fought his way into Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Oxford, they were always a bit of an outsider.
Right.
So they're smart, but they have that edge, right? As opposed to folks who kind of have always had things laid out for them and have never really encountered adversity, right? So Gary Vaynerchuk in his latest sort of LinkedIn post did something good. It's like you're reading about push-ups. You know, it's not the same as actually doing push-ups. So that's my answer. I'll choose ideally somebody who has an Ivy League education but is an outsider, failing which I'd probably choose the outsider over the Ivy League education.
Interesting.
Okay.
What about you,
What
Mike?
about you?
I would go for the outsider, straight up. I think also partly because I'm a bit of an outsider. Education wasn't that important to... Well, I wasn't that smart, so I wouldn't go that far. But the problem I have, and especially if it's not just Ivy League, but MBA and everything, and you know, obviously my business partner Will has an MBA, so it's an interesting conversation we have all the time. I find that when I've seen some really good founders go be successful, have the exit, and go into an MBA, and then become horrendous founders.
What? You mean they actually get deprogrammed?
They get because they overanalyze. I would call it overanalyze paralysis. They overthink things. And I think sometimes, they always say, Michael, but we think outside the box. They become very consultancy.
Oh, no.
And I was like, look, for fuck's sake, a founder does not even think of a box. It doesn't even recognize the box. It's like...
What box?
I think we need to take a shot because this is the 10th episode Michael has used this analogy. So
it's okay. Yeah.
I tell the entrepreneurs, there is no box.
But there is no. I mean, so for me, really, if I look when I'm doing deep tech, you need people who are super smart. You need people who are doctors who've done lots of. But then they come with issues, which is quite often they're brilliant in terms of what they're building.
Yes.
Maybe not the world's most commercial people out there. But if I'm looking at on the enterprise side, I actually like the hustlers. I like the people that. Because also quite often I find the Ivy League or the MBA people, they love to spend money. And they quite often think if they have a lot of money to start off with, they'll obviously grow much faster. And sometimes they think it's like a faucet which they don't need to switch off at any point in time.
Oh, there you go.
The hustlers, I think, are the ones that will take that any money they get and make $1 into $5. And from a very early on, kind of what you were saying, they've had the hard knocks. They've really struggled. So they have a lot more respect for the money and the growth that they've got to go
You
through.
find some of these people in the MBA, so they're sort of like the outsider in the MBA schools.
But
then
we're
they get
generalizing
deprogrammed.
here.
All right,
We're
had you had to
generalizing.
choose.
It's
All right, hold on.
generalizing.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
Reasonable, unreasonable. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Vishal.
Why is he always last? Have you noticed this? Whenever we do this, we always go
'Cause
first,
he's
and he
smart.
sits there,
He's smart.
and then
Yeah.
he kind of like cuts us all down.
Yeah.
You guys are like foreplay for the real intellectual rigor.
Yeah, probably
Okay,
is.
well-
That's kind of the way that we think about it. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That's probably
Keep
going to
that
get
in, keep
removed.
that in.
Is that reasonable, unreasonable?
I think it's a false dichotomy. This idea that it's either an Ivy League person or a hustler, right? The real question is, and I think the real question is that is the Ivy League education a signifier of something that is important to this person being a better than average entrepreneur? And so you remove the qualification from the mix and ask yourself, what are you really looking for in this person? Right. And I think that's the way that I see it, which is I don't think the fact that someone has gone to an Ivy League institution or a first-rate education institution is in itself a check in some box or a pro in a column. The real question is, what does that education signify about that person? And then what do you use to check that
But
off?
that's what they always do. Like, look at this great slide. And
It's
they
true.
put the
Totally.
not only they put the slogans, the big companies,
Totally.
the Facebooks, the Googles.
It's true.
There's some sort of bias, also some heuristic, right?
So let's say this, like, let's say a person says, I went to Stanford, right? Which is a classic, and the entire VC fund's dedicated to just investing in alumni of Ivy League universities. What is that a signifier of? Is that a signifier of a person's intelligence? And then you ask yourself, what are the other ways that you can measure and understand that? Is that a signifier of network? Is that a signifier of, quality of thought? Is that a signifier of knowledge and access? What is it a signifier of?
It's a signifier that it's a filtration method is kind of like you're already
A
in
filtration method of what?
these people are already of a certain caliber.
Caliber to do what?
Intelligent, smart.
Right. So that's what I said, right? So is it an intelligence? Is
See
it
how
about
he's
access?
just
Is it
like,
about network?
but he's
But
just,
what I would, but
Yeah.
I would, so I will still stick to my. I like the hustler, but one thing I have noticed if I look at my portfolio companies, if you can get over that initial stage, which sometimes is a bit of luck, whatever, the people with the MBAs and such like, when you get to growth businesses, it's very hard for hustlers to build
That's
growth businesses.
This is one of the age-old sort of like debates, right? In which whether they're Ivy League or non-Ivy League founders that are responsible for building the largest companies in the world. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is non-Ivy League founders that have
all
a
right.
lion's share of
Anyway,
it. But I might be wrong.
that was
about
part
it.
of the breakfast. You want to do another one?
Yeah.
Okay,
Throw
throw it
the
out.
other
Throw
one
it out.
Kylie and I did was asshole or nice guy.
This one I know the context
Okay, so
because the two of us
Michelle,
debated
I
a
know.
lot, and I know exactly who you're talking. I know exactly the personality.
Kylie brought him up
involved.
as well.
Yeah,
Kylie
yeah,
brought him
yeah.
up. She said,
I know
asshole or nice
exactly
guy.
that.
You know that guy? I go like, I know that guy.
You know,
we know that guy.
I'll share some context over here without naming any names and stuff like that. You and I, we both know
We know,
whoever's involved
we
in this.
know.
And the thing is, you can sometimes meet someone who is an excellent entrepreneur, but is not a nice person, and not a good person, or in the way that maybe not a good person is a bad way to contextualize it, but is an asshole, right? Just behaves like an asshole.
Okay, caveat, that person we're talking about, principled, honest, he just has delusions of grandeur. He wants everybody to like listen
Sounds
to
like
him.
someone I know.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at me?
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
Christ's sake.
No.
Okay.
I think
So
it's not
he
fair.
he
Yeah.
he is a
he's
good
Hian.
guy. He's
Okay,
just that
I'm
he's
kidding.
aggressive.
Okay.
He's got a huge insecurity.
Okay.
That's
We're
what an
getting very
asshole
specific.
is. Yeah.
But okay, the question is, would you invest in an asshole?
versus a nice guy.
It's
Or
not even
nice-
versus a nice guy. I think it's like, would you invest in an asshole that you know that is a great entrepreneur, but he's terrible to the people around him or her, treats people with
Lacks
disrespect,
empathy.
lacks empathy, all
Yeah.
of those things.
But you
Yeah.
still believe it's
But
honest.
because
That's the
because
important
he
thing.
he's
It's like,
believe the
got
person's
it.
honest.
honest. Yeah.
And
So you
but
don't
he's
question
got
the
it, and he
person's
drives so
honesty.
hard.
Yeah.
He's like really like a
Total
conviction,
workaholic.
total workaholic, right? Versus somebody who's a nice guy who's not like completely obsessed, right? So which one is it?
So I'll start since Michael said that I never start with these things because this one we've given some thought to. As long as they're not crossing any moral boundaries, I think we'd still invest. I would, speaking for myself, I would still invest in the asshole but epic entrepreneur.
All right.
Christ, I haven't had a chance to think about this one. This is...
Do you want me to go first?
If you go first, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So, actual empirical evidence, there are people with varying scales, but I really, really agree that, people who are successful in what they do as an entrepreneur, who start companies, right, not necessarily scale up and structure it, they are always driven by their insecurities. So I have a saying, which is never love your passions, love your insecurities. Get to know your insecurities, really feel them, understand what drives them, and then do your best to control them because they are, at the end of the day, the furnace that fires the engines of entrepreneurship. Clearly, I've thought about this one. And so the problem, of course, is that if that person is dishonest or whatever, so that's obviously red flags. But if he just is someone who lacks empathy or just is just completely dogged and, team members kind of like drop out, that's also hard. So the way I told Kylie was the best combination would be, two founders, one of which is a little bit more sane and then another crazy human being. And that's, if I see that coupled, if I see sort of an asshole founder coupled with somebody who is able to get through to him or her, calm that person down, and you see, like what Koh Boon Hui says, right? The ability to disagree in a collegiate fashion, that's really a good team. So
your answer is to change the question.
No, the answer is that...
What if it's a single solo entrepreneur? What if it's a solo entrepreneur?
But it's a person who is truly, like, quote unquote, an asshole. But once in a while, he also has the ability to be sometimes sort of self-reflective or has an ability to sort of listen to people. So the other way I look at it is like, you must have unreasonable qualities, or you're an asshole, but hopefully that's not your default font, right? You pull it out when you need to, but generally you just don't walk around.
Self-reflective asshole.
Yes, a self-reflective asshole. Yeah.
Okay.
If that actually exists, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Michael?
Okay. I've had a chance to think. I would say the first thing is, however they are, I have to be able to respect them. So if I can't respect them, can't work with them.
Okay.
And fundamentally, I don't have to be best friends with them, but I have to actually be like them in some form. Like I could never invest in somebody that I did not like. So for me, they always say first impressions count. If somebody walks into a room, and sometimes you just dislike somebody just for whatever reason, I could never invest in that person. So, but I don't necessarily have to be there. Like some of my founders, I'm happy to invite around to my house because I've become very close with them over the years. There's other ones I respect, I like, but we would never have a close relationship, but we can work together. But I would, when we're making an investment, especially the two of us, we're potentially investing for 8 to 10 years at least. And
I'm investing for 8 to 10 years as well.
You're doing slightly later stage stuff.
Take 1 year off me. That's about it. Right?
Okay, we take 1 year off. We all are.
Hian's just investing in our companies, but at a 3 to 5 times valuation. So
that's good. Yeah. He's got to invest in some more of mine. He's investing in too many of yours. So I feel unloved. But so fundamentally for me, got to respect them, and I've got to be able to like them and feel that I can have a relationship. If not,
I've learned 2 things from what you've said. The first is, I've not been to your house yet.
Actually, have you ever been to? I don't think either
new one.
The new one. I don't think either one. I have to invite you both over.
Yeah. So
that was the second thing
you're going to put that on. And the second thing is, I don't have to necessarily like the person to respect them and say that I think this person is going to build a great company and I think I want to be a part of that. Like I bring it back to like this idea of like fiduciaries, right? Like so if I'm meant to invest in the best companies and that's what I'm putting out, I don't think my likability of a person in terms of like, will I sync up with this person and want to have a beer with them is necessarily the yardstick that I would use. Controversial opinion, right?
No. It's not controversial. But remember what I said is some of them I don't have to be best friends with them or anything. But I think it's also we have a slightly different investment approach.
Right.
For our models are slightly different. Is that we're only doing 5 deals a year, and I believe for our model to work, we've got to work very closely with our founders. And
I think you can work closely with people that you don't necessarily like?
Well, respect.
I'll give you a great
to-
example of something
Okay.
like that worked to a certain extent, right? Like, I do not think that like Travis from Uber was an easy person to work with, but he built a great company. And so if you had the opportunity to invest,
Yeah, life is too short.
fair.
No,
What's the
But
third
I
point?
do think
That's
that
fine.
we talked about this in the last episode, right? I think definitely that founders have become a little bit too
yeah.
dampened, and that is an adjustment to what they're hearing investors say.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that narrative needs to change for them to go back to thinking big and being large visionaries.
And that's why you need Kylie. That's
Yeah.
why you
And to be
need a
quite-
person like him, right?
What's scary is that this is something that I think we can all agree on.
yeah.
All
Is
right,
that I
that's
think
totally a
founders need to go
reasonable-
big or go home.
Okay.
Hey, so out of curiosity, what were you doing in Malaysia?
I'm
I'm
talking about
bullish
your
on
other boss.
Malaysia.
Are you moving to Malaysia?
No, I'm
I
not
don't
moving
think
to
so.
Malaysia, right?
Yeah,
No, I'm
that-
bullish on
that look in his
Malaysia. I'm
face.
finally bullish on Malaysia. You've been there for a long time.
10
But
years.
why?
Right?
But why? Like, why particularly now? Because I like freely admit I've looked at a number of companies. I've still not made an investment in Malaysia. It's
Yeah.
actually the only major country in Southeast Asia I've not invested in. So, and I know Vishal for a long time, and I'm sure he can tell us a few nuggets. But why?
Yeah.
What's changed your mind the last 12 months?
Okay. Monologue alert.
It's not again.
So you've been there for 10 years.
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah, I've been there for 20 years, remember, because I started Asian Food Channel. Malaysia was one of our big deployments. Astro was the biggest customer. I've always thought Malaysia was a great territory. But when we started Open Space Ventures, for whatever reason, Indonesia became the thing. And of course, Malaysia had this political instability. So just like you, we've tried to look for great companies. And, I think maybe we haven't really tried as hard as Vishal. Last year, about this time around February, we started to go up again, and we noticed that a lot of things had changed. The sentiment on the ground was much better. Anwar Ibrahim, the new administration, was really pushing for sustainable economic development. So I started pulling out the economic data from the Ministry of Economy. Have you done that before?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have a full report
Yeah.
that we published.
Okay.
But please go
And so
ahead. But share,
what
but
was
share,
the-
share,
I
please,
just
please, please.
two
I want to
insights.
hear from you.
I got two
Yeah.
insights, right? So the first thing is, turns out Malaysia is actually a net sort of trade exporter, right? So it's actually a very resilient country. It actually exports more than it imports. But that's also because it has a lot of oil. If you take out the oil, it's a net importer. So they have to be very careful about that because their economy, manufacturing, they need to increase that. And their foreign direct investments went from 20 billion in 2021 to 40 billion in 2022. So you know this. And then, you're looking at the numbers, and I was just talking to the administration there. They think it's going to be around 56 billion, for the last year. The additional 20 billion were all from the ICT sector. It's essentially semiconductors. It's essentially people dropping, wafer fabs, big infrastructure. As of 3 hours ago, there was a press release. Google is doing a $2 billion investment into Penang data center. And so the administration needs this kind of foreign direct investment. It's very good for the currency. And I'm seeing a lot of people moving to Malaysia. I mean, we always talk about the Chinese people moving there, but I think now a lot of people are moving over. So they're very pro about the foreign direct investment. It's all about, the ICT, the electronics, the semiconductor sector.
But a lot of that is right at the top. What are you? We're at the bottom. We're the little people.
Yeah.
This is where
Why
we
is
start
that
off.
important?
But no,
Yeah.
exactly. So you've talked about this good stuff. So let's
Because if the ringgit moves in the wrong direction, you're screwed. So the first thing you have to determine is whether the ringgit is going to be weak on a long-term basis. And I think this trend means that perhaps, prediction time, right? I think ringgit is right at the bottom. And so I want to go in. I want to, have a
Ken's
lot of
buying
fun.
a second
I'm
house.
buying a second
I was
home
literally
there.
going to say,
Yeah.
well, that means we should be getting out. So if he's saying, has he ever got a prediction right?
Yeah. He's the
I have gotten predictions right, but hold that. So that's what I think,
he's
right?
the Jim Cramer of calling these things.
Yeah.
Just run
No,
away.
I think that's absolutely the case. And then I'm seeing a lot of people moving their operations to Malaysia. So, for lack of a better example, right? Give the Chinese example. Now, I don't want to let everyone think that the only people who are moving there are Chinese, but I'm seeing a lot of Chinese companies moving there. So I recently talked to someone who has a big deployment in ball bearings and precision manufacturing for large wind turbines, right? So European customers, and he said, "Oh, I'm moving my factory. I'm putting up my first factory in Johor Bahru, not in Penang. We're going to make precision engineering ball bearings." And I said, "Oh, that's very interesting. Why did you do that?" I said, "Oh, the customer requires me to do that, right? Customer requires me to diversify my supply chain," which is basically what he's saying is that his European customers didn't want to buy things from China. They were concerned about the tariffs. But then I asked him, I said, "Well, you could have chosen any country in Southeast Asia. You can Vietnam, Thailand. Why did you choose Malaysia?" And so he said, "Oh, that's a really good question." He said, "If you're going to do automotive, choose Thailand. Thailand's got the best automotive."
Right.
Yeah. If you're going to do something where cost of labor,
manufacturing.
The cost of labor is a factor. And Indonesia, Philippines is really, really good. If you're going to do like the small little things, electronics, Vietnam is really good. If you're going to do precision manufacturing, actually both Vietnam and Malaysia is good, but I chose Malaysia. And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, for my middle management that has to move from Shanghai to Malaysia and live there,
it's easier.
It's not only it's easier, they assimilate. They walk around, they speak Chinese, the food's Chinese. It's Chinese and Vietnamese are different people, right?" And then I said, "Yeah, but what about schooling? Johor Bahru, like what? They're going to send them to like Marlborough College, which is like a very British education." And the boss says, "That's exactly what I'm doing. That's the dream of every Chinese person, which is to send their kid to like a British boarding school and then bring them to like Ivy League, Stanford, Harvard, Beijing, Oxford." And so they are choosing China because it's very, very compliant to the abilities for them to find good labor as well as bring them middle management.
That's all great, but you still haven't answered my question.
Yeah, like, are you investing in Malaysia?
No, what was the question?
Well, my question is that all of this stuff, it's great that the Malaysian economy is doing well.
Yeah.
But from early stage tech investors,
now we get there.
What is it that gets you so excited?
So I think, I think Vishal really has to give like the masterclass on this. But we've spent since last year a whole year looking for investments, and I think broadly there's two sectors. One is semiconductors, chip design, and then the other one is the usual, right? The sort of call it Web 2.0, go-to-market, digital economy, and fintech, and all that kind of stuff. So we're about to announce our first investment, hopefully soon. I think we found a really, really good company. Again, we don't do as many, but I'm starting to see them. They all have phenomenal cost structures. Like I saw many founders move their businesses from Singapore, lock, stock, and smoking barrel SaaS, to KL, and they become profitable. And I think this cost arbitrage is incredible. Yeah. You can build a fantastic back-end cost structure in Kuala Lumpur. Case in point, yourselves.
We have 50 people in KL.
Yeah.
So we started investing in Malaysian companies and entrepreneurs in 2013. I think the first investment we made was in MyTaxi, which then became Grab. The rest is history over there. And we made a series of other investments after that. We have Carsome. We've got now the next generation of companies like Aerodyne and Lottie Files that are really global companies that have started in Malaysia. The funny thing when we were investing in Malaysia back in 2013, 2014, and we benefited tremendously from the fact that Kylie was living in KL, and I was spending a lot of time with him over there as we were starting 500 in Southeast Asia. And it allowed us, when we had nothing to work with, to operate in a low-cost basis. We noticed something that I don't think everyone else was seeing, which is the quality of entrepreneurs that we were seeing in Malaysia, when you compared them to the rest of Southeast Asia, were just as strong. So when you were comparing Malaysian entrepreneurs to Indonesian entrepreneurs to Singaporean, especially Singaporean entrepreneurs, there was no difference in quality. And I think that there was this perceived notion that the companies that were being built in Malaysia were somehow inferior for some reason, but we didn't see it. So we invested in those companies. Funnily enough, and I think here's where it gets interesting, is the successful Malaysian companies that we would invest in by Series A, or if not Series A, Series B, became Singapore companies.
Yeah, they moved to Singapore.
And they moved to Singapore primarily as a requirement from later stage investors who at that time were mainly international firms. requiring them to be domiciled in Singapore. Alternatively, because they felt that it would increase their prospects of raising more capital downstream. And I think that notion is now an old one that no longer exists to the same degree.
Or these international investors are so concerned about your cost structure, they now say, it's okay, go back to Malaysia.
It could very well be
because that's
the case.
really what happened, right?
Could very well be
I
the
think
case.
that narrative was
Yes.
prior to, say, 2019,
Yes.
post-COVID.
Yes.
Singapore's cost structure is completely different.
Yes.
But please,
So over the last decade, we've made about 100 investments in Malaysia. We have 50 people in our office over there. We have an early stage investment team as well as a growth stage investment team under the ambit of Endow Capital that just invests in Malaysian growth stage companies. And it's been running for a while. And the range of opportunities that we see in Malaysia, I think, are really phenomenal. There's just not as many investors in the market. And hopefully that's going to change over time. So I'm a little bit, we've been a little bit Malaysia greedy for the longest time because if there are not too many investors, the bidding dynamics are lower.
Why haven't the international investors have said, oh my gosh, because I think I'm the first person now who is not like the, Malaysian, Kylie's Malaysian. People say, oh, he's only there because he's
Gobi.
Malaysian. No, I mean, Gobi.
You've got Gobi.
Other than Gobi,
I think
who else?
Quest has gone in there.
Who else?
I mean, Golden Gate,
but they've been very few
Golden
because
Gate's in
I'll
Middle
tell you what
East
it is.
now.
And I think I'll tell you what it is. And I think it goes back to something that Hian said, because it's a very similar story about other countries in Southeast Asia and why they didn't take off the same way, which is very quickly after 2012, 2013, 2014, where the first new vintage of VC was born, Indonesia just started to take off in a very big way.
Kylie moved there for 4 years.
Kylie moved there for 4 years. People started to concentrate capital in a very large way in Indonesia. And everything else kind of became second fiddle to the Indonesian story. Fourth largest country in the world. You wanted to, invest in the best founders, dedicate as much effort and time into that market. And once Indonesia started to cool and a lot of those companies started to, come down in valuation, and you realize that not across the board, but there were just some deals that really should not have been done. And that's the case in any market that gets hot, right? Like once the market started to cool and investors now need to say, holy shit, where are we going to generate alpha? So they start to look at the rest of Southeast Asia. So some people started to look at Vietnam or the Philippines. And Malaysia became last in this sort of list, or second last after Thailand, right? And I think it's because of perceived market size and perception of quality of entrepreneurial talent that exists in the market.
You must admit, though, that there's still a lot of work to do. Engineering talent can only get better. Processes.
There's a lot of upside. But,
I think a lot of that, for example, when people would compare with Vietnam, they'll say, we can get great engineering talent and stuff like that. So you got to build on that. And I told the administration, right? Get the golden visas in, get the guys from Ukraine, get the guys from Estonia who want to get out of that region because of geopolitical tensions. Welcome them here, train up the team.
Funnily enough, 10 years ago, Kylie and I did that with Serbian and other programmers from Eastern European and former Soviet vassal states. We tried to get them in en masse into Malaysia to sort of build up the engineering talent. But it didn't work out. It didn't work out because it's not easy to get visas in general. That process is, and now the government I think is working on it and changing and getting it done. But people crossing borders is not an easy issue for any country in general. But I think there's I think the Malaysian story is just starting. So it's great that you're participating in the ecosystem. And I think that there's a lot more upside to be had from Malaysian entrepreneurs and Malaysian technologies. And people I think also another thing that's interesting that's happening is that founders are way more familiar with the idea, even if you're not based in Malaysia, about building a Malaysian presence, back office, manufacturing hub, all of those things that didn't exist before, right? So I think that there's a lot.
But do you see, though, because it's really interesting that you both brought up the cost base, and obviously we've talked in prior episodes about, Singapore becoming overly costly for a startup, and there's obviously visa issues and the size of the market. Do you actually see kind of going forward that Malaysia could be a competitor to Singapore, or actually a very strong partner, collaborator with Singapore?
I've been telling that, and I'm not just hedging my bets, Vishal. I've got a point here.
On the fence all the time, this guy.
Before I answer that question, I think Vishal brings up a good point about the administration's attitude towards having people come to Malaysia. And I've been there for the past 12 months, and I've seen that the administration is now very much about we have to bring talent into Malaysia. And if it's non-Malaysian talent returning, that's perfectly fine because Malaysian talent will return. And so the big event that happened in April, which was KL20, you had Malaysian semiconductor CEOs, Taiwanese CEOs who are Malaysians, say a third of my workforce is actually Malaysians. They live in Taiwan. We're shipping them back. They're only too happy to come back. We're coming back. And the administration is making it very easy for open space to start really, building a presence there. So I just think that if you add all those little pieces together, Michael, and then you have a hunch, and then you're seeing a lot more of these Malaysian folks being very, very bullish about the prospects, the change with the administration, the additional cost pressures in Singapore. It's kind of like a sand pile, and one piece of sand keeps on dropping, and then one day it's just going to avalanche, and it's just going to click.
I'll put it
through.
in a very simple way. The companies raise in US dollars and pay in ringgit.
Yeah.
So the arbitrage is massive. And if you just look at what takes up the most amount of cash from startups, it's human resource.
Yeah.
And so if you're working with a completely different base, it makes a huge difference to the longevity of the company, how much runway you have, all of that jazz, right? I agree with that.
That's my bet. We told people at the AGM that don't forget Malaysia.
I'm glad we can all now do a KL road trip together, maybe record an episode over there as well.
Yeah, we should totally do that.
But on that note,
I think this Poddster suite, we might come back and do it. It's pretty
I love
cool.
it.
I love it.
I just want to say that this is the first time we've recorded outside the open space office, apart from doing it remotely. And Poddster has been an amazing
Yeah, it feels good, right?
host.
Yeah.
And the space is gorgeous. They've got so many different rooms.
I was going to say, we've got to go to they've got a whiskey and cigar room, I think, next time we're going to do.
And I was telling Felicia and Freddie that we should definitely do something even with founders over here. And Freddie was saying it would be a great space to even have an event.
Yeah.
So definitely, thank you for
Poddster
for having us over here in the studio. Really appreciate it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in to the Unreasonable Podcast. See you sometime soon. Goodbye.